there a secret framework that we can leverage today to scale accessibility?
I don't think it's a secret, but I think it's highly underutilized.
And if I have to perform a maturity evaluation at my organization, what are the steps that I need to take, Kelsey?
It's a great question too, because it totally depends again, right?
What are the key performance indicators that you would track to make this program a success?
I think the key performance indicators are so specific to what you're trying to achieve and so specific to how your organization works.
Is it realistic for a non-technical professional to transition into accessibility?
I think it's really, 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 really helpful.
With AI advancing so fast, Kelsey, do you think that manual accessibility testing will still be relevant in the next 2 or 3 years?
Are humans still going to be using technology?
Yes.
Then yeah.
I met today's guest, Kelsey, at Disability in Conference earlier this year. And honestly, within 10 minutes of hearing her speak about scaling accessibility at ADP, I knew I had to get her on this podcast. She's not just the head of accessibility at ADP, she's also a global speaker, a thought leader, and one of the sharpest minds in the accessibility space. In today's episode, we are going deep on how to scale accessibility at large organizations. Not just into what frameworks you can use, but how it actually transforms teams and builds culture. But before we begin, do me a favor, like this video and share it with at least one friend, because your support enables me to get top accessibility experts on this channel. Comment what's your biggest takeaway from today's discussion. Hey Kelsey, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining our podcast today. How have you been?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, Kelsey, as we were chatting off camera, right? I do recall the moment that we met at Disability N. So that little conversation and 3 months of tracking, getting the approvals, we are finally here.
Nothing good is quick, I think, maybe. I don't know, but
Yeah.
totally worth it. And I was so glad that you pulled me aside, because I think those are the little meaningful conversations that we have that make going to those types of conferences so worth it. So
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
honored. Thank you.
Yeah. That's what I have learned over the years, Kelsey. You should always ask. The
Yes.
worst would be somebody will say no to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're not left wondering, like, what if
Yes.
yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I'm glad to have you here, Kelsey. So for our audience who are new to this channel, who don't know about accessibility and about yourself, do you want to share your background? What did you start with? Where are you currently working? And what's
Sure.
your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone listening. I'm Kelsey. I am a digital accessibility professional. Currently, I work for a company called ADP. I've worked in a lot of different sized companies, different sectors, but I wasn't always a digital accessibility professional specifically. So I've kind of transitioned careers in different ways. On what my father, I always say this, my dad always asks me, what are you doing? And it makes me laugh, because I think at each career transition to get here, it kind of looked like a really random pivot, but looking back on all of it, it makes more sense. But yeah, so I'm trained as a speech pathologist and a teacher of the deaf. I also have a degree in assistive technology and an MBA in change management. But yeah, I'm in corporate right now, but I've worked in subacute rehabilitation, early intervention, K-12 schools. I've worked in community transition, higher education. So it's been a wild ride.
Well, that's interesting. Kelsey, you mentioned you have a degree in accessibility?
In assistive technology, I have a certification.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I did that as kind of like a secondary degree path for one of my master's degrees for speech pathology, and it was phenomenal. It covered both like the digital aspects of assistive tech, but it also covered more physical aspects, which I really liked, because I feel like not a lot of programs do both comprehensively,
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
it was pretty awesome.
Well, that's something interesting that I would like to explore as well, Kelsey, because it prepares you not only for digital aspects, but as you
Yeah.
mentioned, the physical aspects, like how to make your building fully accessible or inclusive, right? Maybe that's what they cover in that.
Well, actually, it's funny that you say the physical side of it. I did just go through a training for community access monitoring, which is more
Mm-hmm,
around architectural accessibility. But the assistive technology physical side is more around like low tech or no tech tools that help
okay.
people engage with the physical world. So,
Mm-hmm,
one example would be if there was maybe someone who had a hand tremor who was trying to use a spoon, but a traditional spoon doesn't really
mm-hmm,
have the greatest grip or their grip strength was different, you can use all sorts of tools to create an adaptive grip for that spoon,
mm-hmm,
as an example.
mm-hmm.
So it's kind of looking at the physical situation a person was in and finding ways to make that a more seamless, efficient, effective experience for them by building and fabricating things or
Mm-hmm.
using whatever you had on hand. And it was pretty awesome.
Got it. So it's not physical in terms of infrastructure, but how
Right.
we can assist with different means for a
Yes.
person with disability. Got
Yes.
it.
In the
Got it.
physical environment. Yep.
Got
Exactly.
it. So Kelsey, you mentioned you have transitioned through various career paths, right? So what made you bet your career on accessibility? Was it passion, opportunity, or just frustration seeing how things are being done?
Um, Probably a healthy combination of all of it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think like at its core, right? I got into disability work for a variety of reasons. I've been around people who have had disabilities my whole life, in my family, myself, lots of friends. And that kind of instilled or has instilled, especially over time as I've learned more about all of this, um, a sense of advocacy or awareness in me that I can't forget, right? So that's a piece. I also think part of the twisty, turny aspects of my whole entire life and career path, every time I learned something more, I was like, I have to understand that better because this feels
Mm-hmm.
connected in a way that I can't comprehend right now. And I would constantly like be like, I need to follow this, I need to follow this. And I remember getting into working into the high school aged range, in a high school setting as a speech pathologist. And I was also working as an assistive tech practitioner there. And I was working with all of these students, especially students who were blind or low vision, but also
Mm-hmm.
students who were had dyslexia or other language-based learning disabilities, and they were trying to use um, tools that would read text to them, and
Mm-hmm.
so text to speech type tools and voice control and all sorts of things. And we were running into barrier after barrier after barrier because the world digitally was not built to receive those tools as readily. And I
Mm-hmm.
kept being like, this is so many years ago now, but I kept being like, this is just absurd. And I was like, I have to learn more about this. So then I started falling down the accessibility path and started seeing that interrelation of you could give someone all the tools in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and they could still not have access if the world wasn't built to receive those tools. So it was kind of my, oh, I got to figure that out. I got to look there now.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact to my students at the time was significant. We're talking
Mm-hmm.
from applying to jobs to applying for internships to getting into college, being able to send emails and communicate with loved ones. Like it was impactful in every facet of their life,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to complete schoolwork on their own.
Yeah.
And that just carried over as I was in higher ed, and then as I
Mm-hmm.
was in subacute rehab with people who had strokes and were learning technology to support them. So
Yeah.
yeah, it got wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, Kelsey. When you look back and you try to connect those dots, it's like everything was planned for you to be a lead at accessibility at a large organization, right? So
Oh,
everything played a crucial role.
Everything did play a crucial role, I feel like, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess, do you feel like you've had those moments throughout your career where you're like, "Oh," and then you're like, "Oh,"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it just pushed you, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. It people ask all the time, like, "How did you go into this?" Or like, "Why did you choose this?" And
Yeah.
sometimes I really cannot answer it other than this certain thing happened, and I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I need to explore that more,
Right.
and I allowed myself the opportunity to, but
Exactly. Exactly. Well, if I people ask me, Kelsey, why you ended up as the
yeah,
accessibility expert, my answer is like it's purely accidental. I never planned for it. Right? When you work for large organizations, Kelsey,
yeah,
they assign roles for you. Okay,
yes,
Param is going to be our front end developer. Kelsey is going to be our backend developer. So you don't choose your path, but over the years, as you gain a more
yeah,
experience, you explore things, and that's how you end up what you are today, right?
totally.
With
Yeah.
that in mind, Kelsey, now you are leading accessibility for one of the largest organizations, right? So, if I may have to ask you, what are the biggest responsibilities that you hold as the lead accessibility?
Whew, biggest responsibilities. First and foremost, of course, how people are, whether or not people are able to use our tools, right? So that's
Mhm,
all. It's always like that's the number one thing in our mind. Is it usable? Is it enjoyable? Is it functioning?
mhm,
Number one. Um, I also have a great sense of care, and this is true at any organization I've worked at, for the team that I support. I've found that time and time again. Um, I could never do this on my own. I could never do this work and feel um, that every base was covered, everything was checked, there was the right expertise in the right place at the right time, no matter
mhm,
where it was, without a really impactful team. And so team care is critical to me. And it doesn't mean it's making things easy. It doesn't mean it's
mhm,
not having the hard conversations, but it definitely means a lot having a space where people can breathe and laugh and
mhm,
grow and um, have the camaraderie that is needed to move through the tough stuff because that
mhm,
happens so often everywhere. So I think obviously the people using a product are number one and how they use that product. Number two, the team that is doing that work from a mental health perspective, a physical health perspective, and just like honestly, this, yeah, as you know, and as I'm sure you've talked to, this work is really hard.
mhm.
It's hard to break down barriers that exist. It's hard, especially if you're someone with a disability who's doing this work. You're
Yeah,
working
yeah.
extra hard in a lot of ways. And so I think about that a lot. And then I think it's the overall kind of sense of I don't want people to do this work because they have to. I
Mhm.
want them to do it because they want to. And that doesn't mean that it's like everything's roses and they love it all the time and they're like, "Yes," but
Yeah.
that they know enough at baseline that it matters.
Mhm,
That's success to me, is saying like it's not an afterthought, it's not a tack on, it's just a part of doing it.
mhm.
Um, so I hold those things to be really critical in anything that I'm doing, but user, team for sure.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting perspective as well, Kelsey, because whenever I ask this question to my colleagues or senior leadership, the answer is always in numbers. Okay. My responsibility is to make sure we are 99% compliant. We are
Yeah,
having this percentage of bugs less as compared to the previous release. But yeah, this is a good perspective to put
yeah,
people first, like your products are used by real people.
yes,
And you answered my next question as part of it. I was about to ask you, can you define accessibility success? What does success means to you, Kelsey, in terms of accessibility? So if you want to add to it, please feel
yeah.
free to do that.
I really do think at its core, it is a space, a place, an experience, digitally, otherwise, that is usable, that people can
Mm-hmm.
interact with, um, without experiencing barriers, confusion, having to report issues. Like, it is a place where they just show up and they belong
Mm-hmm.
there. Um, that I think is an accessible experience to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Of course. Yep. Yep. And Kelsey, since you have worked at multiple organizations, they might vary in size. Some might be small, medium, and then working with
Yeah.
large organizations. Is there a secret framework that we can leverage today to scale accessibility?
A secret framework. Um, I don't think it's a secret, but I think it's highly underutilized.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, before I jump into that, I think it's coupling mindset and change management with
Mm-hmm.
this framework is like the chef's kiss. Um, so I think there's the iceberg effect of what people
Mm-hmm.
think accessibility is, and having to help expose what's underneath to be able to help them understand the depths of the culture change and the infrastructure change that needs to happen, the integrations, coupled with I'm a big fan of using digital accessibility maturity models,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're starting a program from scratch or the early stages, or if a program needs a significant overhaul. It's a great way to define metrics because, as you said before, leadership likes numbers. So it can be really
Mm-hmm.
helpful for organizations of all sizes and sectors to leverage something that allows you to define those metrics, to evaluate your progress in a way that's understandable to a wide array of audiences, and then
Mm-hmm.
develop strategies that you can use to make that program grow.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
you rightly said it's not a secret framework, but not used much,
Yes.
right? Why do you think so? Why are people not aware of it?
That's a great question. I think part of it is how many digital accessibility programs get stood up. It can be
Mm-hmm.
ad hoc, right? So if you are starting a program from scratch, and to your point, sometimes organizations of all sizes and sectors will tell you, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
do this, you're going to do this. So
Right.
someone might just end up in the you're going to do the digital accessibility thing and have not much experience. And it's not to say that
Mm-hmm.
their vision and their background won't be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but some things they may miss out on is core knowledge about what's out there that exists that they could pull from. And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of organizations, especially in like smaller and mid-sized businesses, get started in that ad hoc way. And without grounding in something,
Mm-hmm.
without the background knowledge, they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think it just kind of snowballs from there.
Right. Right. And this is where I believe if you don't know something, you don't know. Right.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
this is where having those certifications like CPAC or
Yeah.
WS give you exposure of what you can do with digital accessibility, right?
Yeah,
This is
where you
that's
can
where
go.
I got to learn from.
Right, right. Did you learn about the accessibility maturity model?
Yes, they
You
have as part of their curriculum. So I believe it
see?
is part of CPAC, I believe, but I have
That
to
makes sense.
double check. Yeah, either one of those is having this maturity model.
Yeah, yeah. So if people aren't getting exposure, and
Hmm.
also through connections and being a part of the community in general,
Yeah.
and being able to have those conversations, oh, what are you
Hmm.
doing? How are you tracking goals
Yeah.
and your strategic initiatives? And um, people can miss out.
Hmm. Right. And this is where if they start attending those conversations or conferences that we were part of, Kelsey,
Yeah. Yes.
it will give them exposure.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. It's
So,
so
but
true.
coming back to this, like we know there is a model or a maturity model that we can leverage. Let's dig deeper into this topic, Elsie.
Sure.
Define DAMM or digital accessibility maturity model for a completely new person. Let's make it very
Ooh,
simple.
very simple. It is a tool, and there's many of them. There's
Mm-hmm.
several different kinds that are out there, um, that outlines core areas for accessibility focus, and provides milestones and measurements about how to achieve more maturity over a series of levels, 1 through
Mm-hmm.
5. that get you from a more informal to a more advanced level of maturity related to digital accessibility. And not all of it is related to digital accessibility only. There are some models that extend beyond that a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, that include things like culture around disability, workplace adjustments, things
Mm-hmm.
like that are more hardware based, even, or the physical environment. So not all of the models are
Mm-hmm.
super focused on digital, but there are several that are.
Right, right, right. It's interesting that you mentioned about the different levels within DAMM. So if we
Yes.
have to cover those 5 different levels, Kelsey,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
we start with, I believe, ad hoc.
Yeah, it's like
Oh,
ad
sorry,
hoc or
initial,
informal.
initial, right?
Yeah, informal. Yeah, where
Yeah.
people are just kind of like informally out there doing what they can. There's no
Mm-hmm.
documentation. They're kind of like reacting constantly,
Mm-hmm.
with no real process or something to move forward to. So that's level
Mm-hmm.
one.
Okay.
Level two, you get more into a defined space. Now, suddenly, you're creating more documented standards or
Mm-hmm.
processes that you want to follow. You're kind of creating a more consistent approach. So it doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
everyone's following it at that stage, but you're certainly kind of like building a consistent practice that people
Mm-hmm.
can fall into. Once they get into level three, it's a little bit nicer because you start to enter this more repeatable space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of, if you haven't documented it, it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So the defined stage allows you to move into a repetitious space, so repeated
Mm-hmm.
place. That's like level three, where, all right, you've got these different workflows, you have
Mm-hmm.
documentation that gives point of view, that gives direction. And now you're kind of getting into, like, you're nudging into an
Mm-hmm.
operationalizing space, which is really helpful because it allows you to increase your rigor.
Right.
Um, and then jump from there, right? To get into those higher levels of maturity, which is 4 and 5. So 4 being a more managed place. So you're not just kind of following and repeating processes, but you're monitoring them and you're making adjustments and you're iterating
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that as technology changes, as new infrastructure comes in, as you're
Mm-hmm.
making updates to things, they're always expanding what's possible. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, there's a higher focus on quality there. And then 5, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
You optimize things. You're at a much more advanced level, and that's where you get to start to lean into, hey, we've done a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the foundational work, and now we're here and ready to innovate, to lead, to kind of show what's possible, to collaborate with others in a meaningful
Mm-hmm.
way. So yeah, it lays out a path.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for explaining those 5 different maturity levels, Kelsey. I know audience watching this podcast are gonna gain a lot of information.
I hope
So
so. I hope so.
absolutely. So Kelsey, let me ask you this thing. We know there are 5 different levels, and you work with large organization, you have been part of other organizations. Do you have any insights? What is the average level that the organizations maintain? I mean, everybody wants to be at level 5, but what is the
Yeah.
average industry standard as of today?
It's a tricky one to answer, because not everyone is using the same accessibility maturity
Mm-hmm.
model. There are some that do gather, they have actual scorecards
Mm-hmm.
that, when you input your data, it will kind of show you against others.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at those, and the most recent one I looked at was last year's scorecard for
Mm-hmm.
one of those models. And it kind of depends on the pillar. So we talked about the 5 horizontal levels,
Mm-hmm.
right, of growth, but there's also, depending on the model, 10 to 13 different pillars. So that's more the vertical, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it that way. And those 10 to 13 pillars, every organization is so different about where they're putting effort, or like where they're trying to mature more or faster or more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So I think largely it depends on what the focus is, and it largely depends on what model you're using. So I tend to see somewhere between 3 and 4 is where the scores tend to
Mm-hmm.
be. Um, but that's usually when they're trying to like push forward somewhere.
Right.
So, and that's in an organization that probably has been at it for a little bit. It's not like a new
Mm-hmm.
organization. So it really just varies so much.
Okay.
Size, sector. You'll see more tech-heavy focused in tech orgs. Education spaces, you might see it heavier on the like
Mm-hmm.
accommodations, adjustments, or culture side. That's what I've generally
Mm-hmm.
seen. So yeah, it really depends.
Sure, sure. And if I have to perform a maturity evaluation at my organization, right? What are
Mhm.
the steps that I need to take, Kelsey?
It's a great question too, because it totally depends again, right? So there are some that there's really two paths you can take. One is to hire an external company to come in and execute an accessibility maturity model assessment on behalf, right? So that's a completely
Mm-hmm.
unbiased view. Pros and cons to that, right? So the pros being completely unrelated to your, thoughts, feelings of people internal to the organization. Cons being they don't really necessarily know what your business is, how it
Mm-hmm.
runs, how it works. They don't necessarily know like what you're selling, what you're trying to achieve, your goals. So pros and cons. Um, and then of course a self-assessment is the other path. And again, kind
Mm-hmm.
of the flip side of there. Obviously, there's some biases that are a part of that. Um, but you also do understand the right people to talk to, why,
Mm-hmm.
what your company is trying to achieve. So I don't think there's a right answer. I tend to find that organizations of different sizes and sectors will kind of
Mm-hmm.
oscillate between them and kind of use one as a pulse check and the other as like a metric setting space. So, but regardless, so if you kind of go the first route and you're hiring someone to come in,
Mm-hmm.
you're not necessarily doing nothing, because often you'll be working to help manage all of the conversations they'll need to have, what they'll need to send out for requests for documentation and assets, for review.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of like planning that has to happen in that side, and kind of project management of the project itself. But you're not necessarily the one hosting all of those conversations. You're not writing
Mm-hmm.
the report and synthesizing the data.
Right.
On the flip side of it, it can be, of course, more resource constraining and daunting to do it internally, but you're still project managing it, but you're also executing all of those steps, starting
Mm-hmm.
with who are the people we're going to have to talk to, which model do we want to adopt, right?
Right.
Um, and who are the people that are best slated, whether in either regard,
Mm-hmm.
to be a part of those conversations, to aggregate the assets they might need to start deep diving and looking at data and insights. Um, Really like having to get your stakeholders together across the different pillars.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been a part of organizations in the past where we have internally kind of started it at baseline, and we've created a stakeholder map, but also we've created an internal form where we have taken all of the key milestones across the different pillars and created really in-depth
Mm-hmm.
questions with a lot of like, if this, then that branching behind it,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can target really specific information and then leverage that data to give us insights about where are we in this
Mm-hmm.
space. Used both quantitative and qualitative data for that, from that form. The report writing can be really daunting too. um, but yeah, so you kind of step one, figure out the model. Step two,
Mm-hmm.
get your stakeholders together, plan some conversations, find out, what you want to collect for assets and information. Step three, get
Mm-hmm.
together details, so that you can set out, not just the conversations, but a quantitative assessment of information, so you can get some actual data to look at and explore. And then step four is really looking through all that data and putting it out into a consumable report for your internal teams and stakeholders, as
Mm-hmm.
well as a more executive related summary for leadership. Like, hey, we figured out we're in these different pillars, we're at this level of maturity, generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking. And this has set the stage for us to determine these are our goals for next year, or this is part of our five-year plan now. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the results part of it because you get both immediate actions and long-term
Yeah.
actions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So with those steps in mind, Kelsey, let's do some hypothetical scenarios,
Yeah.
right?
Oh gosh. All right.
The DAMM result for us came at level one, which is initial. Now, you being the head of accessibility, what steps you would take to ensure that by the end of, let's say, 2 years, we are
Yeah.
at least level 3 or 4.
I would say I would how big is our company?
Let's say 10,000 employees.
Are we global or just
Yes,
US related?
global. Let's stick to US. Let's stick to US.
Okay, 10,000 people US. Are we largely a technology forward company?
Let's go with those assumptions. Yes, technology
Okay, okay.
forward company. Yeah.
I have to ask these
No, no, of
questions
course.
largely
Fair
because and
point.
my my last
Yeah.
question, how long have I been in the role?
Let's say 3 years.
Oh, wow, okay. We're at level 1, 3 years in the role. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if that was the hypothetical scenario, I would be wildly concerned,
Mm-hmm.
um, as in that role, and I would probably be asking for a significant pullback and complete restructuring of the
Mm-hmm.
program, whatever was set up. So not knowing what was done in those 3 years doesn't sound like too much, right? Um, I'd be really looking at, okay, we came out at level 1.
Mm-hmm.
Where in level 1 did we do well? Like, what were those checkpoints in that level 1 pillar? And maybe let's just say that are we level 1 across all of the pillars or just the digital part?
Let's go over. Let's say we were at level 1 for communications, like
Okay.
how we were not able to communicate that we have an accessibility program.
Okay.
Secondly, there is a training pillar as well, how well we are training the colleagues,
Okay.
right? In terms of for designers, what is needed from their end, developers, how to develop inclusive assets, testers,
Okay.
how to test properly. Let's go over
Okay.
these two. And if you want to cover any third pillar, like how well we are taking care of our end user experience stakeholders, like
Yeah.
people who are customer care representatives, because
Okay.
when you do the surveys for digital accessibility maturity model, Kelsey, you reach
Yeah.
out to everyone
Everyone.
across your
Yeah.
organization. So let's take
Yes.
these three pillars and see what we can improve there.
So you're bringing up a good point because and part of the reason I'm asking so many questions is because if you're
Mhm.
not asking questions, you're never gonna get to where you need to
Yeah.
go, right? Like, the reality is I would probably say in this scenario, it's been 3 years. We have 10,000 people in the US. I'm not sure what kind of business we have. It's unlikely we're gonna reach level 4 in 2 years. We have, like,
Mhm.
some significant cultural work to do, some significant probably, on the ground, like, tactical work to do. I don't know how many products we have, but if we have a lot of products, it's gonna be a very, like, strategic effort. So I would be
Mhm.
very, very interested at that point in looking at, um, where did we score well? What things were we doing? And then trying to figure out where do we wanna go? So you're saying those 3 places in particular, looking at the technology, looking at our and it kind of sounds like 2 places, the technology from a training perspective
Mhm.
and from a skill set perspective,
Right.
and user experience perspective, and then communications, like how we communicate internally and externally about accessibility.
Right.
So if we're kind of focusing on those areas, I'd be looking at we need a 1, 3, and 5-year plan for sure. The 1-year plan is gonna lean heavily into those 2 things. The 3-year plan is gonna lean heavily into, like, whatever our stretch goals are, and then that 5-year plan is hopefully gonna get us more toward the level 3,
Mhm.
hopefully a level 4, but so much is unknown at that point, which is why I don't spend so
Right.
much time on the 5-year, but it's still a good place to have for, like, what are you aiming for?
Mhm.
But that 1 year, the documentation part of this, I always say this and I'll say it again here. If it's not documented, it doesn't exist. And unfortunately, because accessibility is such an unknown for so many people doing the work on the ground, they just never learned about it in school. It was never something that they had come across in a workplace environment. They may know and engage with people with disabilities in the community, but not in a way where they would necessarily understand the impact of
Mhm.
technology on that person. And so I think that level of unknown, education is so deeply required, but so is handholding.
Mhm.
Um, hand-holding, meaning people need to ground themselves in something to be able to have any type of cultural or work-related shift. It is
Mm-hmm.
impossible to follow a process that doesn't exist. Like, you're going to get people in that level 1 forever, ad hoc, creating it up themselves, like trying to just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what
Mm-hmm.
sticks, right?
Right.
And that's the antithesis of what you want for a strategic approach to an accessibility program. So it's really having to rein in all the reactivity and figure out, okay, these are the 2 things that we're going to focus on. And we need to figure out what are the very key metrics that we want to look against these, right? So, okay, we want 100% of our technology people trained. Great. We want to make sure that we get information up on our website about how to reach out to the accessibility team or whoever is going to be
Mm-hmm.
responsible for that. We want to make sure that we have some policies in place. What are our teams expected to deliver as part of the product development lifecycle? Because if they don't know, how do they do
Mm-hmm.
that, right?
Right.
So some policies and processes in place. I'd be pulling back significantly to make sure that people know what they're supposed to be doing. You
Mm-hmm.
can build a house on a shaky foundation, but it's going to fall.
Yeah.
So I think our goal is probably to rebuild the foundation, make it stronger so
Mm-hmm.
that when you build up, it doesn't collapse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is where I start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Having the right education. I believe before even education, creating a fairness for the need of digital accessibility, right?
Yes.
Why we are doing it in the first place,
Yes.
how it's going to impact the end user or consumers that we have. So yeah, clear on year 1, year
Yes.
3. Let's go
Clarity.
1 to 3.
Yes. Lots of clarity, lots of education,
Mm-hmm.
practical application of that.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, and this is something it goes back to what I had asked before about like, what do you hold dear essentially? The team part of it. It
Mm-hmm.
is so important to me for my team to have fun and for me too. And when we're having fun, it's easier for other people to have
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Yeah.
And I think it lightens the work a little bit in that, yes, you're doing this because there are people on the other side that this will make or break their ability to
Mm-hmm.
engage. You're also doing this because it can be fun. It can be
Mm-hmm.
joyous when you're kind of able to just have a second to find a way to like allow for play in that work. I think people are much more apt to come to the table to be like, yeah, let's like roll our sleeves up,
Mm-hmm.
let's dig in. So that's always been something that I've been so lucky to have teams that are ready to just like dive
Yeah.
into like playfulness.
Mm-hmm. Of course, having that kind of team is a
Yeah,
blessing, Kelsey.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
It really is. I'm very, very fortunate and have
Mm-hmm.
been historically in
Yeah.
many places. So
Okay, so
yeah.
we are done with year 1, Kelsey.
Yes.
Now
Okay.
let's go from year 2 and 3.
Yes. Okay, so we've got processes in place. Perhaps we've stood up an internal website, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
got where you get access to appropriate tools that you need, where you get access to your education, where you get access to like how we want to inject accessibility throughout the product lifecycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of core facets of that one pillar. And then the second pillar being that communication side, I'd probably start to lean in heavier here at that point. So marketing teams become really important in that regard, internal and external. What types of communications are we trying to put out to our clients to make them aware that we
Mm-hmm.
have a team that's ready to hear and listen? And get more information about what they're experiencing, but also internally, it leans into that joy thing again. So often when you've got teams that are doing really good work, highlighting that and
Mm-hmm.
being like, hey, y'all, like this team is doing incredible stuff. Let's learn from them. Let's create this community of practice. Let's elevate that. That can kind of help with that cultural change management aspect
Yeah.
um, because it can be so hard otherwise. So you're leaning really heavy into that work because it
Mm-hmm.
gets people engaged.
Yeah.
And it can be really easy to lose that engagement. So once you're kind of getting more into defining processes, you start to get to be able to play with that more. you're seeing teams starting to get heavier on the manual testing side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of organizations, all sizes and sectors, will start in the automated, semi-automated testing space, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. It gets them up and going, gets them exposed to like, what does an
Yeah.
accessibility issue look like? So now we're getting into more of like, what are users experiencing? How can we become better testers? And also, how do we bring disabled people into this experience so we can learn? So we have enough of the groundwork done to be able to welcome them in, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
gather insights, gather research, usability, and insights, and leverage that to make products better. So I think you start to really see a big shift in that direction
Yeah.
after, everyone gets their feet under them, which is
Mm-hmm.
very cool. Um, and I think once you're kind of moving, past year two, you've got these processes in place, you're starting to see the debt go down, you're starting to see the kind of the magic of the work come together where you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing teams run more efficiently. It takes less time to fix accessibility issues, so you're optimizing them in that way, and you're getting a lot more positive client feedback. That allows you to really start to look outward and be like, who can we collaborate with, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
especially as larger companies, you see that a lot with really big companies is so many companies integrate with one another and products and tools. So it allows you to kind of say, we've done a lot of work. We're here. We
Mm-hmm.
want to help. We want to get out there and support. So I think you
Right.
start to see the shift there as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you spoke about like creating a healthy competition among different teams or gamification of the concept so that
Oh yeah.
they're encouraging each other. Okay, let's try to be at the top of the table
Yeah.
next month or next quarter, right? So that's
Get
interesting.
highlighted. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so easy in this work to be
Mm-hmm.
we it's so easy to just be glossed over because there's so much to do all the time, right? So it is really important to highlight the folks that are just often far too forgotten. I wish I could elevate so many good people every single day.
Mm-hmm.
um, it helps to know that someone has thought about
Mm-hmm.
you and appreciated the work that you've done. So
Yeah, it's all about celebrating even the smallest of milestones,
yes,
Kelsey.
yes, yes, I
Yeah.
agree. I totally agree. It's
Mm-hmm.
because it's not small for someone, you know?
Right, right, right. So, okay, we are done with year 1 through 3, wherein we have created awareness, educated our colleagues, have processes and policies in place. Now, from year 3 to year 5, what should we do?
Oh, we should really be focusing on quality, hardcore,
Mm-hmm.
really, not just like eradicating bugs, but also optimizing experiences. So, it's one thing to be accessible, it's another thing to be usable. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the key you're starting to get into that space of like, we've gotten a lot of insights from folks about what's not working, but now it's time to get insights about what's working, but not well. Like, how could we
Mm-hmm.
make it better? How can we also, once you especially are kind of getting to that leading space or that like optimizing space, how can you unblock the disability community from access to the success as well? So, what is like, I see this with companies who, they get their products out there. They're far more accessible than they've ever been. They're far more usable. They focused a
Mm-hmm.
lot on quality. And now they're collaborating with organizations and the community to upskill people on how to use that technology to become a practitioner, right? Like to be
Mm-hmm.
out there. And that really helps to look at things like closing the disability employment gap, right? So I think that's kind of a level 5 to me is, all
Mm-hmm.
right, we've got all this. How are we using this for good out there? How are we
Right.
leveraging what we've done to help others, other organizations do similar things, but also how are we unblocking access to work, to community, by upskilling others on how to use our tools to do that. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a huge shift is really in that leading space.
Yeah.
So you're really, really emphasizing the key distinction between accessibility and usability.
Mm-hmm. And that's where my next question is as well, Kelsey.
Yeah.
people always confuse between if something is accessible, that means it will be usable. So please
Yeah.
clarify that for our audience.
Oh, yeah. So I would say accessible to me, and you asked me this earlier, what does accessible mean to you? My definition of accessible is probably more like usable, enjoyable, because I do think that they really shouldn't be so distinctly different, because if it's an
Mm-hmm.
accessible experience, like a core foundation of usability is accessibility, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't have a usable product if it's inaccessible to some people, according to Nielsen Norman and their honeycomb diagram, right? But I think out there in the world, generally speaking, the key distinction between accessibility and usability is accessibility is like, do I check the box for conformance standards? Have I met all of the criteria that our organization is trying to achieve for whatever relevant technical standard you're looking to
Mm-hmm.
achieve, whether it's WCAG, whether it's EN 301549, et cetera, like check, 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 check. And does it meet those things? But I think usability is looking at it as a whole. Does it function? Like, it's one thing if I am able to check the different boxes, and make sure that they're correlated with one another, but am I able to flow through that whole entire experience without having to second guess myself and say, wait, these check boxes were related to that. What's my cognitive
Mm-hmm.
load, right? Like it's the beauty of having such a reduced cognitive load on a user that they're able to seamlessly move through the experience without having to check themselves over and over and over, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is true for anybody, whether they have a disability or not. It's just the added layer of having to ensure that accessibility exists to then jump into, okay,
Right.
does this function?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what would you
And
say?
yeah, and we often talk about this, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Even after having or achieving 100% accessibility conformance score, your
Yes.
website might still not be usable,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's
Absolutely.
where, yeah, and that's where having usability studies performed by real people with disability become critical to your process. That's where you
Yes.
need to have those people in place.
And I think a lot of testing teams, um, and again, everywhere, I've seen it
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. Their whole goal is to test more so very specific things. So it's like and that's kind of accessibility to me from like a
Mm-hmm.
technical side. It's like people are checking off very specific things, but it's all like it's like the difference between a bowl of fruit salad and a smoothie. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the bowl of fruit salad, you can see each
Mm-hmm.
distinct. You're focused on the piece, but the smoothie is the usability. It's got to come together in a way
Yeah.
that's seamless, right? So you don't want to have to chew the smoothie. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Exactly.
Is that a weird analogy? I don't know, but it
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it as well, I guess.
Yeah.
No, it will
Think about
remind me of you every time I have a smoothie.
You'll be thinking about, is this a good smoothie? Do I have to
Yeah.
chew it? Is it hard to drink?
Mhm.
That's when you're like, it's true
Exactly.
that it is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And we spoke about our senior leadership or executives, right? It's good. Okay, we have DAMM model. We are at level 5. But
Yeah.
why should senior leadership care about this? Like, what is in for them? Like, why should they budget you for having such a large maturity model in place?
At the crux of it, because the world cares about accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
So from a straight numbers perspective, sales, right? Like you are hard pressed at this point to find um, companies of different sizes and sectors, or where no one
Mm-hmm.
has asked the question, right? When they're going to work with that company, are you accessible? Um, so it's going to be a question that will always be asked by
Mm-hmm.
different sizes and sectors of organizations. They're going to want to know your conformance. So, and if you aren't conformant or you have no one there who can speak to it, no one who's continuously saying, yes, we have processes in place, they're constantly iterated on because technology constantly changes,
Mm-hmm.
standards change, legislation globally changes, regulations shift, expectations change. Also, I don't know a single company that has had the same people working at it every single day for their whole life, every day, right? Especially in
Exactly.
tech. So you're also dealing with turnover. And we know that many people are ill equipped to do accessibility work.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly having to reinvent or like re-bring people into the fold to make sure that they're doing it well. Because if you don't, quality suffers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually it catches up and you're in that cycle again. So you have to find the way to maintain like the
Mm-hmm.
foundations, regardless of all the moving pieces. It's like there's a book by a woman named Danella Meadows. It's called Thinking in Systems. And I love it because what it does is it allows you to think about the system in which accessibility is interjected. I'm not a fan of thinking that accessibility is its own system, right? It is a part of a broader system, and the system doesn't function well without accessibility intricately and specifically embedded.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of the key part of it, right? Is like if
Mm-hmm.
we're tracking accessibility in the whole system,
Sure.
when you remove a piece of it, the system breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're there as health workers of the system. But we're also there because the reality is like it will impact sales and
Mm-hmm.
the landscape is ever changing.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the takeaway I would say from this, Kelsey, is DAMM helps you define processes, right?
Yeah.
If somebody is leaving the organization for any reason, you
Yes.
have systems built in. It's easier for them to follow the process rather than
Yeah.
depending upon individuals,
Yes.
right? Awesome. That's good to know, Kelsey.
We were all to win the lottery tomorrow, right? Other people could come in
Yeah.
and pick up where we left off. And that to me
Mm-hmm.
is because I think it's three things for the digital accessibility maturity model. It's being able to define your metrics, right? It's to evaluate your progress, and it's to develop your strategic plan. All
Mm-hmm.
three.
Nice, nice. That's the right way to move into the next question. I was about to ask you what are the key performance indicators, Kelsey, that you would track to make this program a success.
Oh my gosh, it totally depends. I think the key performance indicators are so specific to what you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
achieve and so specific to how your organization works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing I can say is that when you're developing key performance indicators, you need your triad there. Like you need representation from the whole core function of the team.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me. Um, if you are if you're an organization with one product, right? Maybe you're a startup and your team is lean and small, and then you can use that to then expand it outwardly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you want to make sure you have your product person, you have your design person, you have your engineering person. And I would even say, yes, your triad, but who's your quality lead? Who's your researcher?
Mm-hmm.
Those people need to be in the room with the accessibility professional to look at what's the data and information we have. Where are we on the accessibility maturity model? What is our what are we hoping to achieve? Where are we trying to go? What
Mm-hmm.
is the culture of this business now? What are we capable of doing? And work from there. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
cough.
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
No, all good.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I
good.
think it's so different. KPIs are so
Mm-hmm.
different
Yeah.
for different products, different organizations,
Mm-hmm.
and so highly dependent on maturity.
Got it. Got it. So, Kelsey, working for large organizations such as ADP, what was the most difficult or the most challenging obstacle that you faced to push for accessibility?
I would say everywhere that I've worked, it has been everywhere. It has been the cultural shift.
Mm,
It has been the idea of, especially for really large organizations who maybe day to day, a lot of the folks are not as ingrained in the disability community. So they're not seeing disability often. So there's that impact, right? And then when you're starting a program at an organization that's maybe been around for a long time, having to figure out the way to inject it strategically and not make it, again, it kind of comes back to the systems conversation. I'm not here to build a separate system for accessibility. I am here to enable the current system, the people within the current systems that exist, to ensure that they are embedding accessibility into the system from end to end. So I think if I substantially create a separate accessibility system, it will never work together. So yeah, so I would say that's kind of the hardest part, is finding finding the right people in the right place in the right way at the right time to make sure that it's injected and stays there and doesn't drop off from a priority standpoint. So it's kind of like you always have to be on. You always have to be kind of like pedal to the metal, like in people's faces about it, because if you're not, especially in big companies, there's 1,000 priorities that people are looking at. So how do you keep it top of mind?
Right. And whenever we talk about digital accessibility for large organizations, Kelsey,
Yeah.
the moment you talk about accessibility, teams think it's another add-on to what they're already doing. So there's already a wall that you build. So
Yes.
if you start with a different system in place,
Yes.
there's no way they're going to build for it. So you have to, as you said, strategic about injecting accessibility at the different SDLC phases.
Yes.
Having that harmony that, okay, you are building it for a regular user, build it for a person with disability, because once you build for a person for a disability, you're building for everyone.
Yes, exactly. And it's really like, there's actually a woman in Toronto. Her name is Judith Trevanius. She did a lot of work with the W3C. Many years ago, she did a lot of work with the W3C. And she works at the Inclusive Design Center as part of, I think, a university maybe in Toronto area. And she has done phenomenal work around accessibility, kind of understanding business and accessibility in particular. And I saw her speak several years back, maybe in like 2018 or 2019 at a conference. And she talked about what she calls the virtuous tornado, which has a lot of historical kind of implications coming out of things like, she takes you back in time in history to talk about, why are we still talking about the 80-20 principle essentially? And why are we still applying that to business? And what's wrong with that, especially when it comes to like disability? And what do we know about the human experience that suddenly doesn't make the 80-20 principle make much sense? And she explores all of that in such an incredibly eloquent way. And I think about it all the time in the work that I do, but especially when I'm talking about what you just said, the idea that when we're designing for humans, right? We think about people in that bar graph way, or like generally we've been taught to think about people in that very like bell curvy way. But she asks us to like squash that and to say, humans aren't two-dimensional, they're multi-dimensional. And even when we're talking about, when we squash that bell curve, it becomes a starburst, right? And talks through what that means. And the beautiful thing about that is, even though you still have density in the center, in that way, it allows you to think about people as naturally really, really unique. Because when it comes to like disability, right? If you're thinking about a person with a disability, maybe someone who's deaf, who requires the use of closed captions or ASL, but let's say closed captions for now. On the starburst, that person may be completely physically without disability, is able to walk, is able to move around and do different things, but oh, we're going to circle them up here on the starburst because they can't hear, so they will need accommodations of some kind, closed captions. Now, what if you have someone who is neurodivergent or who prefers to use closed captions on the TV? Suddenly they have the same need as a deaf person, but they are not deaf, But so you start to like map the human experience in this starburst way to say,
Mm-hmm.
we all have reasons for different experiences and how we show up in the world, and all of them are relevant. And some people require that, right? It must be available for them to have an authentic experience in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we start with those necessary authentic needs for experience to help us drive decision making? Because we know other people benefit, right? Because we know
Mm-hmm.
that people are not homogeneous. They're very diverse in the way they
Mm-hmm.
show up in the world. So I love her. Anyone listening should go and read that article, The Virtuous Tornado, Uta Trevanius.
Yep.
Great way to think about
Mm-hmm.
everything,
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
everything. So yeah,
Absolutely. I will put that link in our channel
amazing.
description, in this video description, for our viewers to watch and hear to that.
Yeah.
We spoke about a lot of things related to DAMM maturity model, Kelsey.
Yes.
If it's that beneficial, if it has so many outputs that we can look at, can we assume that in next 3 to 5 years that can become the industry norm or industry standard to scale accessibility?
I think if organizations are, many of whom are looking for a consistent way to talk about their program, to talk about what they've achieved and what they're trying to achieve in a consistent way, it
Mm-hmm.
has to be. If they want to create actionable plans, something to build from, or when they're stuck, I think all of us get there, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there have been times where I just sit there in different places I've worked and I'm like, oops, and then we have a cat here, sorry. um, there have been times that I have, been in the middle of a 3-year plan and I'm just like, something's not working. Like this doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're getting traction. And I can look at those results and I can look at what are the options ahead. And I always adapt maturity models to the culture of the organization I'm in or like how they work. Um, and I think that's really, in some ways, how the models are intended. They're intended to be across different sized and sectors of
Mm-hmm.
organizations. So the milestones within each of the pillars are able to be expanded upon, right? You're able to break them out into more specific actionable items. And
Mm-hmm.
I do that with my teams because when you're stuck or when you're feeling like maybe this isn't the right place to put our energy right now because we don't have the right culture around this right now, this is something we can come back to. It
Mm-hmm.
allows you to look back and make a different choice and move
Sure.
forward.
Yeah.
So I just find it to be a really consistent way
Mm-hmm.
to approach scaling, to approach conversation, to talk with leadership about where are we? Where are we trying to go?
Mm-hmm.
Often teams on the ground will be like, what are we trying to achieve? It's much nicer to be able to say,
Yeah.
at a high level, we're trying to get to this level. And what does that mean? Here's all the things that
Mm-hmm.
that means. And here's
Correct.
where we are in that process. So it gives everyone the macro and the micro, depending on who
Mm-hmm.
they are and the context they need.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it, Kelsey. Now we are into the last segment of this podcast. So let me ask you, because most of our viewers, Kelsey, they are from the non-technical background. Either they have taken a break because of maternity leave or some other reason. Now they want to transition into the IT field. So is it realistic for a non-technical professional to transition into accessibility?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really, 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 really helpful to have people of all sectors or like backgrounds, of all backgrounds coming
Mm-hmm.
into the accessibility space. Um, most of the people I've met in this space have had really interesting backgrounds, like
Mm-hmm.
really nothing to do with technology often, not always. But I think that's part of what brings people to this space too. There
Mm-hmm.
has to be some sort of reason that, especially if you've taken time off and you're exploring things that brought you to want to learn more about this. Absolutely, you can make a pivot. There's many ways to kind of
Mm-hmm.
dip your toe in. There's many different specialty areas. Not all of them have to do with engineering. I am not highly technical. I have some knowledge, especially over the last, 15 years doing this work in different ways. But there's a lot of need for things like project management, program management, communications work in this space. So I really, I would never discourage someone from doing this work. However, the other flip side of this is I was asked this recently. Often in different teams I've been on, I think a lot of people who get really passionate about accessibility, who are doing not accessibility only work, will always ask, oh, when can I join the accessibility team or blah, blah, blah. I always want to remind people, I would love to have everyone on my team or on the accessibility team. Often people are so much more impactful doing the work on the ground, though. Having accessibility allies in non-accessibility focused roles is what makes the wheel spin. So when, if we're talking about marketing, I would love to bring every marketer onto my team because it would be fun and great. But the work that they're doing with an accessibility focus and specialty in marketing is so much more impactful to the end result of being able to make a more accessible world than by centralizing everyone.
Right.
So I'm also a big fan of upskilling champions. And that's because there's so much work to be done. And it's the flip side of it being like, not every accessibility professional is going to be a marketer, is going to be a procurement person or a legal person. But there's a lot of legal people, procurement people, and marketers who could learn accessibility skills relevant to that work. And I find that to be the most beautiful thing in terms of like getting traction. So I think no matter whether you're looking for an accessibility specific role, yes, it's possible. Also, if you have a skill set, if you are, in communications, or if you're working as a lawyer or whoever you might be, a program manager, bring accessibility to that role somewhere. You don't have to be on an accessibility team. And that will probably be a relief to whoever is on the accessibility team. But such an impactful way to get others on board too.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Yes, you can transition from a non-technical background into accessibility to be very specific. And as you mentioned, there are multiple roles that you can adopt to, right? And for people who are, let's say, doing comms work, putting out company posts on LinkedIn, simply start with providing alt text to images. That's what we need. That's how you make those images accessible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Documents, right?
Yeah.
Like the impact emails, like all the things. And so I'm a big proponent of start with what you can, where you can, when you can.
Right.
If all you can do right now is add alt text on all the relevant things you need to add it on, great.
Right.
If all you can do is make sure that your documents are accessible right now, great. That's one little bit more accessible in the world. And the more that you help others come along with that ride, you're so much more impactful in the butterfly effect in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Than by sitting on a central team. So pros and cons. Pros and cons. But
exactly.
Anyone can get into this work, although I would say learn from the disability community. Get out there, ask questions, follow people on social media who have disabilities and listen to their experiences, all different types of disabilities. I think it's really important to understand, one, a wide array of experiences and perspectives that aren't your own. And two, in some ways, if you've got the grit to work through it, because it's not always easy. It's not easy. And it does take thick skin. And you're going to fail a lot more than you're probably going to win until you start winning and seeing success for people. And so I think there's a layer of also knowing, like, are you ready for that? So that's kind of a big piece of it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Joining those communities, understanding how they operate using assistive technologies will certainly give you a new perspective. So thanks for sharing that.
Time. Yeah.
Okay. I promise I have last two questions for
No,
you,
that's good.
Kelsey.
This is great. I've loved chatting with you.
Yeah. Thanks. Everyone is talking about AI. And with AI advancing so fast, Kelsey, do you think that manual accessibility testing will be still be relevant in the next 2 or 3 years?
Are humans still going to be using technology?
Yes.
Then yes. That's
Okay.
it. So long as humans have some sort of interactivity with technology,
Mhm.
yeah, because manual testing is what gets you to the usability versus the accessibility.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yes, there's pieces of manual testing that gives you accessibility, right? Like, and understanding
Yeah.
that. But holistically, if you're trying to understand, is this technology usable?
Mhm.
And humans are still around and we're still using that technology, then yes, manual testing is important because it might look different than the
Mhm.
manual testing that we do today, but we still are going to have to do it. It
Yeah.
might just be different test cases we have to do,
Mhm.
how the technology has changed, but we'll still have to do it. We still have to ensure quality. We still have to ensure that a variety of interactions are successful and usable to interact with that technology. So, so long as humans are around trying to use tech,
Mhm.
it might
Absolutely.
look different, but it will still
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It might, as you said, it might look different, like
be
how we are doing manual testing today. It could be
yes,
more of a hybrid model, wherein you are partially doing the manual checks using AI, which is taking care of the rest of it. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and possibly. And
Mhm.
also there might be like it might be thinking about like, for example, if we're using I don't know, if you're navigating through voice predominantly,
Mhm.
and you have someone who has a speech related disability, I am not convinced right now that AI has been equipped enough to be
Yeah.
trained on the wide array of experiences of someone, maybe in the future, but as of right now, there's such little training of disability within
Mhm.
AI. There's a lot of work to do there. It's an opportunity, right? Um, but with that, when I think about the like intricate experiences that people have, I'm not sure that it will fill that gap yet, but also I don't know how we'll be interacting with
Mhm.
technology in
Right.
5, 10 years. So another reason why having teams and programs is so important, it has to be able to shift and adapt with
Mhm.
everything.
Right. Right. You never know what's for us in the future in 5, 10 years.
Yes. It's
Mm.
it's really wild, but
Right.
um
Right.
cool. It's
Awesome.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question for this
Yeah.
podcast, and for viewers, we are leaving out a lot of questions. There were a lot of questions that I have prepared for Kelsey, but because we want to get to keep it around an hour podcast, maybe we can have a part two with you, Kelsey, where we
Oh, that
can
would be
discuss
fun.
what we missed out. Okay,
Totally.
so coming to the last question of the day. If you
Yeah.
had a magic wand, right, and if you could fix one accessibility challenge overnight, what
Ooh,
would it be?
oh my gosh. Digital or physical?
Let's
Anything?
let's stick to digital accessibility.
Digital. One accessibility issue overnight. Like, oh gosh, that's a hard one. It's a hard one because in my brain, what's happening in my brain is
Mhm.
I'm thinking by standard or by like experience.
Let's take experience.
Maybe, oh man, this is a tricky one. I'm like tempted to say, well, actually, you know what I would do? I would make sure that every single video has audio description and also has American Sign Language as part of the video.
Mhm.
Or like multiple languages. I would love to see video players because so much is done through video now.
Mhm.
I would love to see better video experiences where video players naturally embed ASL, where you can toggle it on and
Mhm.
off, just like you can captions. Same with audio descriptions and transcripts. I would love an all-inclusive, like Able Player, which is out there,
Mhm.
that is used ubiquitously and that everyone is including multiple languages, transcripts,
Yeah.
sign language in the respective country or language, and audio description.
Well, this would help my video or our video that we are recording reach to a lot of audience with multilingual
Yes, yes,
things.
yes,
But yeah,
yes.
awesome. That's
That's
that's such
probably
that's good to hear, Kelsey. Thank you so much for
uh,
joining us today. I
thank
believe
you.
there is a lot of things to learn from what a maturity model can do, how it can help scale accessibility at large organizations. But
Yeah,
the important thing is it all starts with the culture. If you have the
yes,
right team and you have built the right culture into it, maturity model is just a medium to achieve what we are trying to achieve.
the
So
foundation. Yeah,
exactly,
we
exactly.
want a strong foundation.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much, Kelsey, for joining
Oh,
us today. I'll share
thank
this
you.
podcast with the audience and hoping for the best.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure. And if anyone has any questions, please find me on LinkedIn or at a conference or wherever. I'm always happy to chat.
of course. I'll share your LinkedIn profile in our description.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey.